Canada's economy grew in July, but just barely. According to Statistics Canada, GDP rose by 0.1%. Economists were expecting a decline, but they haven't turned rosy for future months. According to Capital Economics, strong gains in the natural resource sector will prevent the economy from contracting this quarter, but it looks increasingly likely that GDP growth will turn negative in the coming quarters. What might that mean for politicians tasked with managing a possible recession? John Manley is a former Liberal finance minister and a senior business advisor with Bennett Jones. Hi, Mr. Manley. Good to see you.
Thank you.
That GDP number for July, it's not great, 0.1%, but it seems to have beat expectations by a little bit. Do you see the glass as half full or half empty?
Well, it's got a little bit of remaining fluid in it for sure. Whether it's half full, I'm not sure I'd go that far, simply because there are so many uncertainties out there, not just in the Canadian economy, but in the global economy right now, including, of course, what's happening in the United Kingdom in terms of their financial markets. What is the U.S. Federal Reserve planning to do? And then just throw in an added measure of energy insecurity in Europe and war in Ukraine and Chinese economic challenges, and you've got a toxic mix.
And I guess as out of that mix, then I put to you, there are so many forecasts right now that are predicting some sort of recession. How deep the recession goes seems to be the subject of conversation. Do you think that it is inevitable that there will be some type of recession that Canada experiences?
Well, very often, if the United States goes into recession, we do as well. And so the language from the Federal Reserve has been a great deal, I'd say, more aggressive than has the language from the Bank of Canada. And it feels to me as though with expectations of the Federal Reserve rate going over 4%, that they are driving their economy into a slowdown, and that's probably going to affect us. Now, good news in this, and that's why there is still some fluid in the glass, is that first of all, we do have shortages in terms of the workers, so the impact on employment is going to be less. And also, if the Bank of Canada is a little less aggressive in raising interest rates, then I think we'll see the Canadian dollar continue to fall against the U.S. dollar, and that helps our export trade quite a bit.
I want to pick up on that. Is your expectation that the Bank of Canada is a little bit less aggressive? Because there is also some focus on them, of course, as well, and some kind of back and forth about whether they're being too aggressive and they might send us into a recession itself by hiking rates so much. Do you expect that to tone down a bit, I think?
I think the rhetoric is already toned down somewhat, especially if you compare it to some of the other central banks around the world. But also, I think they're dealing with a different situation in Canada to some degree. And I regret to say this: we are price takers when it comes to interest rates. And so that when the U.S. raises its rates, usually that means the longer term rates are going to go up. The Bank of Canada only really controls very short-term rates. And if investors are looking for higher returns and the longer bonds and the yields go up, well, that's going to affect us directly. It'll affect the cost of money here in Canada. It'll pull up those other rates, including personal lines of credit, that are out there, as well as mortgage rates. So it's not all about the Bank of Canada here. It's about international financial condition.
And a little bit about, I think, for Canadians watching, and certainly Canadians watching this show in particular, what the federal government decides to do. Turn back the clock 2 decades. Imagine you're still in the finance minister's office right now. You're looking down at the possibility of a recession, let's say 6 months from now, or even sooner, of some type, a recession of some type. What's going through your mind at that juncture?
Recessions lead to changes in government. We saw it repeatedly over the years. It's very hard for a government to gain strength during a recession because people are hurting, and we're seeing to some degree this being played out in the United States right now, or in the United Kingdom rather, where the Bank of England is trying to raise rates, and the government is producing more economic stimulus. Inflation is quite a bit higher there than it has so far risen to in Canada or in the United States. And you've got this push and pull between fiscal policy on the one hand and monetary policy on the other hand. That is a bad situation to be in. The trouble with that, Vashi, is the United Kingdom is not, like, this isn't a small regional economy we're talking about. We're talking about a G7 economy, which can have implications for the broader global economy as well.
So then, from your perspective, what is it inevitable that there be a change of government, or that this current government face, I guess nothing is inevitable, but that they face that much of a challenge? And what's your assessment of, I guess, where things stand right now? And I'll tell you why I'm asking very, very bluntly, right? This is the subject of question period every day. This is what the new opposition leader, the new conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, focuses on day in and day out. And I'm wondering if you think it's resonating, if you think it might work, if it's a vulnerability for the Liberals, or if you think their counter narrative is working.
Well, I think that, this goes back to Bill Clinton running against George H.W. Bush. It's the economy, stupid. And Canadians have had a pretty benign economy for quite a long time now. We had a rough patch through a pandemic, but nobody blamed the government for that. And I think that most Canadians felt that the government's response to the pandemic, although some of us curmudgeons, as you know, complained a little bit about the degree that they were spending during it. But most Canadians, I think, would say they did what had to be done in the circumstances. But now the shoe's on another foot right now, and people are having to face inflation, which they have not seen in a generation or two. It's a long time since we fought those battles with inflation back in the late 80s and early 90s, and where recessions were actually brought on in order to bring inflation under control. And so we're getting a lot of, quite frankly, economic gibberish now about, let interest rates go. Inflation, will come under control. And inflation is what destabilizes an economy. The people can't trust the currency, they can't trust their savings anymore. Then you can't have investment, you can't have economic growth. So getting our hands on inflation, getting it down to the level that Canadians have confidence in and are not constantly feeling they've got a hedge against 4%, 6%, 8%, in the UK 10%, is a very important step. So I think that the government will pay a price for this because they are on the defensive. I think some of the solutions that I've heard advocated by both the left and the right would not be particularly helpful in these circumstances.
Okay, Mr. Manley, I'll leave it there. Thank you, as always, for your time and your insights.
Pleasure, Vashi. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.